eat. So I think it's 7 o'clock. So I think we can, there's Greg. So I think we can start. So I'm going to call to order a meeting of the FinCom Subcommittee, which is the Guidelines Subcommittee, and I chair that. And this evening, we're going to have the schools. So Dr. Hunter and Jared Stanton are going to respond to aspects of the letter that we sent out at the end of July, which was our request for information. So this is our first meeting of guidelines. Next week, we have another meeting. And then on the 21st, we will actually issue our preliminary guidelines. So next week's meeting is Minuteman and the town. So this is our first round of meetings. So I have to do a roll call, I believe. So why don't we start? I'll just use the boxes on my camera here. So Greg Guerrero.
Here.
Parashar Patel. Parashar, are you here?
Here.
Kathy Kukalo.
Here.
Dick Jamison.
Here.
Dee Ortner.
Here.
Mary Hartman.
Here.
Don Hickling.
Here.
Ray Andrews.
Great.
Ray, you're on.
I'm still here. Okay.
Okay, great.
Now in audio. Oh,
Okay. Wade Rubenstein
here.
and Lois Wassoff. You're on mute.
Sorry, here.
That's all right. Great. Okay. So we'll start. So tonight, as I said, we have Dr. Hunter and Jared Stanton. So thank you for joining us this evening. I know that both of you started very early today, so I appreciate that you're still.
We did.
Yeah, you did, and that you're still lively and ready to go to talk to us tonight and do your presentation of our first round with the schools. So are there any preliminary comments that you want to make, Dr. Hunter, or do we go straight to Jared?
He is going to cue me early in the slideshow, so we'll let it play out the way we planned. Thank you for asking.
Okay, sure. And in terms of questions, so I think this is the first time we've ever done this via Zoom. Usually this is a very interactive discussion. So I think, Jared, I think it would probably work if we kind of let you go through and we hold the questions to the end. Does that make sense to you? Because otherwise, I don't know how we'll manage it.
Sadly, not my first rodeo on Zoom, but yeah.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. So I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. So if you can give me permission to share my screen, then I think I should be ready to go.
You should be ready to go.
Wonderful. I have too many, I always say this, I have too many screens in my house, so I don't know which one I'm doing. There we go. How was that?
That looks good.
All right. So thank you for having us. I think a lot of this information, believe it or not, many of you have seen before. It's a lot of old information that I presented in July, then again in October, and then some of it I presented to you all in December. So I'm going to break it up into two presentations. So the first one actually is going to be really about the Concord Public Schools, and the second one will be the region. So maybe after the Concord one, you can ask some questions, and then we can go on to the region. Great. So the first thing that we'll be discussing is the need to completely rebuild the budget and in a way, rebuild the school systems. Next year is sort of a bridge year, and Dr. Hunter will speak more about this in a later slide. Then we have the revised timeline and what to expect on certain dates. You may or may not have seen the end of year balances in the 100 DESE format as well as the 1000 format. Also our end of year balances in our revolving accounts, gift accounts, and other accounts. We are negotiating with 7 of our 8 unions this year, and 5 of them impact the CPS budget. I will also recap our special education expenditures and show some multi-year comparisons. I'll update you on the FY21 capital plan that you've already seen. And lastly, I will update you on the CARES Act expenditures to date. So I'm going to turn this one over to Dr. Hunter.
Yeah, I think probably it is definitely the most important thing for us to do tonight is help frame context of the conditions we're building this budget for FY22 and the really wide range of variables that still exist for us. I think, just in terms of high level takeaways of where we are in the schools and how COVID is impacting us. The good news is we've managed to stay open this entire time. That was an unknown, and we've gotten more confident that that will be the case despite quite a surge even as we speak. What we don't know is what the impact of a vaccine will do in the short and long term. What we don't know is, well, I guess these are subcategories to the vaccine. Teachers are in phase 2. There is no child vaccine that is still under testing. That's really just barely begun. So we are expecting that we're going to be in this through, the school year, and in some way, and that's the problem, right? In some way, we expect there'll be COVID impacts to the 2021-22 school year. So we're really trying to strategize what those options are going to be. The obvious things are, it's that same continuum, but I think there's more stops in the middle, from fully remote, which I think we're taking that off the table. If we can do in-person hybrid now, we can certainly do it in the fall, all the way to fully in-person and, really normal functioning. The middle has had more iterations start to appear, which is a good thing, because I think it means we can make progress even if we can't get to fully included normalcy. But, I see just scenarios of, can we get all the kids in, but we still have distancing going on and mask wearing and such, and we're trying to figure out how we could make that work. Versus, are we still stuck doing this hybrid model, especially at middle and high school, where kids are not coming to school every day? Are we still needing to give them 2 or 3 days remote at home? And so we just don't know the answers to these questions. I think the part we're hopeful, I wish I could say confident, but hopeful for, is that by the end of 21-22, we are very close back to that normalcy. I mean, that's 18 months from now. I think we'd all hope to believe that second half of 21-22 gives us opportunities towards what we're used to, with all kids in school all day and some normal things starting to happen, maybe less masked, maybe more typical crowds, et cetera. So that's another wide range of set of variables. So we're trying to think through all of the options, and frankly, right now we have to plan for all of them. And Jared will talk on how he's working through the logistics of that. I think we're going to narrow down, and it's good town meetings in June, because I think as the next 6 months go by, it's going to go from being this wide to narrowing as we go, as we learn more, as the vaccines given to teachers, we'll better understand the impact as other things start to progress. Hopefully, as the spring comes and we're back outside, things start to get better in terms of case counts, if not before. So every month is going to be a whole new set of information, just like it's been since August as we reopened. So I think I want to just preface your expectations that this is the first, I think, of several conversations. We're slated to be here with you in February. I know we're going to need to come back at least in March, probably a couple times between April and June, because we're going to have to make these live budgets. So we're going to talk with the school committee on this on Tuesday night. We're going to get to a warrant number in March, but it's going to be hard for us to say that's the number I expect. So just some of the variables that play into all this that I just mentioned. Jared just mentioned collective bargaining. We did not plan to have 7 of our 8 units up this year. That has got some COVID trickle down to it. We did 1 year contracts in some places where they should have been bargained last spring. Just all of it coming together for the traditional 3 years and the 1-year extensions, et cetera. So that's a significant impact. We understand that to the budget. Other drivers, substitutes and long-term subs. We've not been hiring per diem subs, and yet we have more long-term subs than normal this year. So the way that plays out. Professional development, it's interesting, we had done more but offered a lot as voluntary, and we're going to need to reinstate some lines. Software, which is so key and critical to how we're operating right now. Jared and Kristen Herbert, our teaching and learning director, have really taken on the challenge of getting all the software in one place and trying to really vet it so that we're looking at eliminating redundancies, continuing to use more common platforms, even across departments. It should drive to some cost savers, but it's only relative to what we're spending under COVID. So the high cost of what we've had to do for COVID will come down some, but will it get all the way to where we were? I doubt it, because we're going to need some of this into the fall, at least, and beyond. Supplies and materials, we did reduce that, bringing you the FY21 budget that was passed a few months ago. So we're going to have to look at what we may need to reinstate. PPE and what we're going to need to buy there will be a question. Jared, your slides just disappeared. It's all right. I have plenty to talk about. I don't need them, but you will. So the list is pretty long. I mean, that's just a selected handful. We have a few positions we didn't replace at all this year. So, for example, we have one music teacher teaching all 3 elementary schools because it's remote. We can creatively figure that out. That obviously isn't going to work when we get kids back in the building all day. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. I think probably the other piece I'll talk on for a minute is to compare year to year is going to be very, very challenging. We've got apples and oranges pretty often here. So where you landed in FY21 doesn't look anything like where we were in FY20, and it's going to be hard to compare that in 22 as we try to come post-COVID. So just want to, it's usually such a critical part of our discussions for very good reasons. It's going to be really hard to use those exactly the same way. So I think my job tonight was to set Jared up for the context under which he's going to share all of the other information. You're going to hear a lot of we don't knows, and I just, again, want you to be ready for that. And we'll tell you what we do know. We got some information today more on CARES Act that's coming, and this second round that was just federally funded, and we're expecting just under 4 times what we got in the first round, which is great news. That's going to be a big help to the discussions we're going to be having with all of you, because it's about $1.5 million across the 2 districts. I don't have the split off the top of my head, probably $1.1 million CPS, and I don't know, don't hold me to that, but some sort of split to that degree. That's a big positive, and Jared will reference some of the we brought you ways we were making sure our reserves were staying flush, and that's going to be part of the discussion too, because that was intentional to help us with FY22. So lots and lots of moving pieces. This is the beginning of quite a bunch of conversations from what I can tell. So did you fix that just in time as I stopped?
Yes, I somehow lost volume. I apologize for that. I don't know how that happened. Can you all see that now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So I really didn't hear any of that.
That's all right. You've heard it.
I heard you did.
You've heard it about 10 times already. So I know you know what I said. I know you do.
Great. So. Sorry about that. So moving on, we have an updated sort of budget timeline. So right now we're really in the beginning phases of the development. I have been working with the principals on staffing. Some of the elementary school principals, we've already done the zero-based non-salary budget. But right now for the middle school and the high school, our budgets are due on back to me on January 22nd. So today and tomorrow and next week, I'm working with department chairs at the schools, helping them build their budgets. Then they're going to be working with their principal, who will vet that and then sell it to us the week of the 25th. So the week of the 25th through the 29th is going to be really all about budget. And we'll be trying to put together some sort of number, or at least something that we can start presenting to you all as well as the school committee the week of February 1st. So on February 2nd, we'll give a status update to the school committee of where we're at. We might have a preliminary number for them, and then we will bring that same presentation to you all on February 4th. On February 23rd, the goal is to present the recommended superintendent's budget to the school committee, and then they will deliberate up until March 19th, which is a Friday, and that is when the warrants are due. Usually we have a budget, a couple of days before that, if not a week before. But that will be our, as Dr. Hunter said, our preliminary budget, and it will be adjusted really in April, May, and June as more information comes out regarding federal and state funding that I'll talk about a little bit more. And then June 13th is the Concord annual town meeting. So this report probably looks very similar to, familiar to many of you, but for those of you that have never seen this, it's very easy to read. Here's a report for our Concord's FY20 general fund budget by DESE 1000 function. The first column is the function, and the second column is the funding description. The Concord Public Schools does not carry debt. We are a department of the town, so we have no 8000 function, which is debt in retirement service. Below the table is a summary of items that are in each function. Our approved FY20 budget was $39,390,163, and the adjustments will always equal zero. And the adjusted budget will always equal the adjusted budget. The adjusted budget plus the expenditures should always equal the main budget. I always keep our budget balanced, which is not necessarily a requirement as long as you do not overspend the bottom line, but it's always good to have a balanced budget. We make a number of transfers throughout the year, but FY20, as you know, is a year like no other. The 4000 series may stand out a little bit. We saved on maintenance, contract services, supplies and materials, plowing, heating, and electricity, and maintenance overtime over the final 4 months. There was essentially a freeze on everything. And programs with other districts, our tuition lines in the 9000 function, I charged more tuitions to the general fund, so I was able to build our circuit breaker balance. Circuit breaker is the state's special education program that started in 2004 to provide additional state funding to districts for high-cost special education students. Circuit breaker reimbursements are for the district's prior year expenses. Each summer, districts submit claim forms to the Department of Education listing the types and amount of special education instructional services provided to each student during the previous fiscal year. By law, we are allowed to put revenues in a revolving account, and we can carry over a balance equal to or less than the amount that was received the prior year. The next columns are the expenditures to date and the remaining balances. Again, these 3 columns should always add up to the approved budget. And as you can see, we spent right to zero. This one, I don't know if you can see it with the small print, but here's the exact same report, but it's by what I call DESE's 100 function. Each one of our accounts is tied to a DESE 100 function. We do have some accounts that are no longer a DESE function, but they are closely tied to another updated function. When we do our end of year report, we have a crosswalk. So we are reporting to the state the correct functions. Every few years, DESE updates their chart of accounts, and it's really impossible to keep up with, and you actually lose account history if you're changing your accounts every single year. Again, some of these may jump off the page a bit if you're able to read it. In the function 2210, school leadership for one, we transferred 434,000, and mostly, which is mostly due to assistant principals, which are now in this function, and they were budgeted in the 2305 function before, teacher classrooms. 2330, paraprofessionals, we transferred 413,000 over the course of the year. There was a need for tutors and aides, more of a need than what was actually budgeted. There was a savings in transportation across the function in the 3,300 one. Typically, we don't do anything in the general fund for food service, but we do, because we do such a great job of being self-funded. Because we did lose quite a bit of revenue last year, we wanted to continue with a healthy food service balance going into this year, because we knew that revenues would be down, and we charged $217,000 to the general fund in the 3,400 function. Here is how we closed our revolving gift and other balances. We ended in a very good spot. We were able to max out our circuit breaker revolving account, and all summer and all spring, this was not something that I think that we could do until we really closed out. This will hopefully set us up in FY22. The other balances I was concerned about was the food service balance. Again, we were able to charge some expenses to the general fund in order to get the starting balance close to the beginning balance. This is approximately 3 to 4 months worth of expenses. It's important to note that none of these funds can be used as a funding source to offset the general fund. I'm sorry, none of these can be used as a funding source to the general fund. So I need to start off by saying that this was our budgeted FTEs, and it was the first time we showed these, which had been a request for many, many years from the Finance Committee. And it was truthfully something that I was always used to showing. But our operating system, which was installed, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, which has the capability of tracking these, was never really set up to do so. So while there have been many additions and subtractions this year due to the pandemic, especially in the tutor totals, we don't have the capability at the moment to run our current moment's FTEs. But I assure you, we will keep the budget in balance, and I think this is something that we will try and do when we put in the FY22 budget into the operating system. I broke the FTEs into 13 different types. This budget includes approximately 387.09 FTEs. Some administration, clerical, HR, and maintenance staff are split between the two districts. This also does not include the FTEs for our bus drivers. That's an additional 15 to 18 FTEs. The reason for that is because their hours are not always consistent, and we need a formula to base what a 1.0 FTE is. I do expect to show FTEs in the FY22 budget for transportation.
Jared, this is Prasher. Are those FTEs are planned, or because you said they're not actuals, I think, and so how should we think about what those?
These are the budgeted actuals. So these were planned. It has fluctuated a little bit, but literally I could break down every request on the budget by the FTE, and so these numbers are accurate based on what we budgeted for.
Budgeted, but are they filled?
They are all filled, and then there have been some additional tutors that we had to carry this year, in addition to some teaching staff, because people due to the pandemic are working remotely or they've had an excused leave of absence.
Okay, thank you.
It's really the most complicated jigsaw puzzle I think any of us have ever seen, the way we're staffing the schools right now. And we might give you a count one day and it would change the next. So we're trying to give you the data you want. It's we have the obvious historic software challenge, but we also have a very realistic, enormous challenge this year in trying to figure out how to show it to you.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to get a sense of, would we, if it was only 90% of the positions were filled, or there's some savings anticipated as a result of that, et cetera. That's all.
Yeah.
I think part of what I would say is because of the late build of the second budget we made, we were able to use those as cost savings in the budget. So we didn't have, like the music teachers, 2 of the 3 retired. So we didn't fill those, and it lowered the number we brought you. But you can also hear me remind you, we're going to have to put them back. so we didn't really have any of those little spots where that played out because we did it so close into the, so close to school opening.
Yeah, fair enough.
Again, all 5 bargaining units at the CPS are up. Of the 5, 3 are joint with the region, and we are slated to start bargaining with the CPS custodians in about 2 weeks. As you can see, due to all the hard work that we've done internally in special education.
How long is the bargaining? The next bargaining round is for 2 years or 3 years? What's the standard term of the contract?
Usually 3 years.
3 years, okay.
Yep.
Hey, Parashar, I think we're just going to try and hold it to the end.
Okay.
And so here's our special education expenditures over the past 3 years. As you can see, we are keeping more students in district by creating more in-house programs and a continuum of service at all grade levels. And the numbers are really starting to show. At this time, we have 22 out-of-district students at CPS, which is dramatically less than we had 3 years ago. It's important to note that we have no control on who moves into our district, and we are responsible for their educational obligation. That is why we have our circuit breaker revolving account maxed out, and it's the reason why the Department of Education allows us to do so. Laurie, did you want to add anything on special ed?
Yeah, I just briefly, we've spoken a lot about the internal programs we're building, and, we're building them because they're good for kids, but it's clearly bringing some fiscal savings that we're able to keep the kids with us. And by servicing them in district, it serves the budget well too. And, it's been pretty satisfying, at least from my seat, and certainly Ruth Gruby's seat, to see the progress that we're making. And I know we're making more progress because we keep getting her numbers from her, and we're seeing out of district placements continue to reduce. And that's not because we're not serving kids well, it's because we're keeping them with us and they're staying in their home schools or within the district at least. And I think we've turned a corner in a mindset kind of way, which has been really exciting. So I think you'll continue to see progress there, which is, I know, good news to you too. So.
Great. So every year we update our 5-year capital plan. The amount that was approved at the last town meeting was $830,000. We anticipate that we will continue to stay within the town manager's budget of $900,000 for the foreseeable future. We will start with the energy recovery replacements at the Thoreau this spring and early summer. Our preliminary plan for FY22's capital plan continues with the ERU replacements at Alcott and Thoreau. And we also anticipate energy savings of around 25% once these projects are complete with the ERUs. The Concord Public Schools received $819,358 in CARES Act and DESE emergency relief funding. 2 things happened recently. Number 1, they extended the first round of CARES Act funding till next year. Originally, it had to be expended by December 30th, and that does not mean encumbered. You had to expend everything, so you couldn't on December 20th order a whole bunch of PPE. So on or around December 20th, they did extend that to next year. which will allow us to potentially offset some of FY22's budget if we so choose, because we can carry that money into next year. In addition, a second round of the DESE emergency relief money was announced based on our Title I formula. So we have, for the first round, that is the $112,379, we have until December 2022 to spend that money. So right now we do not expect to use any of that. It is not as stringent. We can use it on basically anything in our budget. It's not like the CARES Act. And they just recently announced, I want to say in the last 2 days, that we're getting an additional $112,379. And I expect that money to also be able to be used really up until the beginning of FY23. So that's really good news. And as Dr. Hunter said a little bit earlier, we're hearing that there's going to be additional CARES Act money based on the Title I formula, up to about 3.8 times the 467 number you're seeing there. And if that's the case, that will help us out big time going into 22 and 23.
And Jared, I'll qualify. I heard that from the Commissioner of Education this afternoon. It's not a rumor. It's pretty solid information.
Right. So I know that you all received a report from Kerry LaFleur on their CARES Act funding and what they expended it on. I will be doing the same exact thing to our school committee on Tuesday. So that is it on the CPS side. And as you know, the region has a little bit more components to it, but happy to answer any questions on the CPS side.
Jared, what was the ERUs again? I forgot. There was something replacement units or
energy recovery units.
Thank you.
Right, that work was supposed to start this past summer, and we didn't do it because of COVID. So we expect to start executing on some of that as we get into this summer.
Jared, on the head count, the non-union, what does that consist of?
So non-union. So we have a number of secretaries in central office that are non-union. We have
all the tutors at CPS are non-union, so that's a big, significant number. Plus this year, yeah, we have student supervisors we've hired, mechanics. A handful of the other office assistants are non-union.
That's a broad category. Yeah.
Yeah, very. It literally is everyone not in a union. So, yeah.
Hi, Mary. Yeah.
I got a question. Looking forward to FY22. Do you have a number for? You mentioned something about a big increase in CARES Act. Do you have a number? And do you have to spend all that money on COVID-related expenses? Oh, okay.
We do. Yeah.
Okay. And how much is the number? Do you have the number?
Well, we don't have the number yet, but we got 467,000 plus for CPS alone. And if it's 3.8 times that,
I can do the
math. Significant amount.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And also looking forward to FY22. Do you have a feeling now for how much you'll save on early retirements?
We do not yet. The deadline for that is January 15th.
Okay.
Jared, how do they define COVID-related expenses?
Sure. So really, anything related to COVID. So whether it's PPE, whether it's hiring an extra tutor to cover a classroom because there's remote learning, software, anything that you could say is you had to do because it's COVID related. We couldn't go ahead and repave a sidewalk with that money. We couldn't pay our current staff with that. We did have to hire additional kindergarten teachers this year. due to class sizes and remote, that is something that was eligible. So Zoom, big cost, that is eligible. So a lot of our softwares, the PPE, while you think we had to order a ton, masks and shields, and but there's only so much. That's not a huge expense. It might be $100,000, but going into this, we thought we were going to have to spend $300,000 just on that alone at CPS. But there are a number of other costs that we had to spend due to COVID. Kathy?
Yeah, I have a question as we're talking about COVID, and maybe this is for Dr. Hunter. What about the airflow in the school buildings?
Yep. So we had a consultant come in last summer and did extensive work analyzing and evaluating our air systems. Everything was deemed of good to high quality, except for Sanborn, Peabody, and Ripley. So his recommendation, which we followed, was to purchase air filters. So we have air filters in every classroom at Peabody and Sanborn, and in any of the more, preschool classrooms at Ripley. I don't have one in my office because I'm in there literally all alone all the time. But so we were able to do that, and that would certainly be a CARES kind of related cost.
Yeah. And I've been going around, I have a CO2 detector in my trunk. So I've been going around to the middle schools and going to classrooms, which was great because I get to stay in there 5 to 8 minutes to see the kids. So we've been going in, Ian Rames, a number of the maintenance guys, and doing tests. Every single number that we've pulled, which was 100 or so, if not more, came within range. So the air quality, and we did a lot to get it to where it's currently at. And as Dr. Hunter said, HEPA filters in pretty much every single classroom. All of the dampers were fixed and opened. And that's going to be actually one of the reasons why our utility costs are going to be increased. And we anticipate the increase in FY22 and potentially beyond, because we are keeping those open. Therefore, the air is going up.
Thank you.
Christine?
Jared, can you go back and maybe put up that chart that has the labor contracts, the page that you had, the little chart on that?
Sure.
And can you take us through that being very important drivers to costs? I'd like for us to understand the timing of the negotiations and anything you can tell us about the status of them and where you think you're going, et cetera.
Sure. Let's see. And I even have a timeline that I gave the school committee.
Yeah, I'll let you pull that up and just talk and we got 5 of the school committee members here. Just, it's so odd that they're here and I can't see them, but they're here. So if you would like to talk to them, they're not in session, so they can't talk much, but we did actually have to strategize the timeline from now till June so that we could figure out what to do when. When he pulls that up, the biggest driver that you will not see on this chart for CPS is the CCTA is also up, and we haven't bargained with them. We cut it short last year and just did a 1 year, so we haven't bargained with them in 4 years, really, other than the little abbreviated thing last year.
And the reason is they're often connected, Lori?
Well, we've intentionally, the school committees and unions have all purposely synced them up so that the timelines of renewal are the same. What we thought we were going to do was sync them up last spring because the CTA had a 1 year extension in the 1 year version of theirs just for money, so that when the CCTA in 2020 bargained, we do both of them in the spring of 2020. So instead, what happened is neither of them really got, we did them both enough to get through this year. And so now we're still back at needing to bargain with both teachers' units. The difference being the CTA is just a money reopener, essentially focused on COLA. The CCTA is the whole contract and all the language pieces.
So I'll sort of take you through the timeline. I'm one of the lucky ones that gets to do all 7. So we're starting, as we said, we've already started with the CCTA. So that's going to take most of the winter in the spring. In 2 weeks, I am starting negotiations with the CPS custodians. I anticipate that to take about 4 weeks. Then I'm going to be starting with the high school custodians. Again, that should take about 4 weeks. From there, maintenance, and that's going to take about 4 weeks. And then we have transportation, and then the secretaries. So I'll share this with you, and this is sort of my preliminary timeline. It says draft there, but I think it's something that we're already on target, even though it's only January 7th. We do have a ground rules meeting with the custodian set for January 19th. So if we can stick to this timeline, and I've done pretty much almost all of these unions already, have done negotiating with them. So I do anticipate that these meetings will take, anywhere from 4 to 5 meetings, not including the ground rules. So, but our budgets are going to be due well before we settle with most of these. So placeholders will be put in, but that is no different than our current budget.
And so it's the CTA for this budget that's probably the biggest driver. Is that fair to say, I guess?
It would be the COLA, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just COLA for that particular negotiation, whereas at the high school, it's everything.
It's everything.
Okay, and everything would include benefits as well?
That's actually usually separate. Because they negotiate as a whole, the benefits. And then for CTA, we don't carry the benefits in our budget. It's something that the town does. So for the region, we do budget for that. And I actually do talk about health insurance and the costs in my next presentation.
Right. Okay. So you're not going to have an answer until if there's 10 meetings, so you won't be done with the CTA. I'm sorry, 1+ meetings. End of May is what it says. So CTA, you won't be done until right before the meeting, right before the town meeting.
So we anticipate most likely probably finalizing with the CCTA before we get into negotiations with the CTA, because they have equity right now, and I think they're going to want that. So that's why I put 1+ meetings, because it's not going to take very long, hopefully.
Oh, I see. Because they're going to negotiate essentially together?
No, definitely not.
Yeah,
But,
no.
Okay.
but equity is important to them. So
Yes. Yeah.
you can hear the nuance there probably.
Yes, yes. Okay, I see. Yep, I see. Okay, thank you. And I have a follow-up question that's somewhat related, Dr. Hunter, to your comments about the need to come back. So from a warrant perspective, you're going to have a budget, let's say by the end of February or so, to have a number in the warrant. So do you expect that the number you're going to go to town meeting with is going to be different?
It could be,
Okay.
and obviously lower, not higher, because that's the way it has to work.
Yeah.
We would rather, we're going to get to the best place we can get in that timeline with a lot of variables we just don't know. So the more informed we get, the better we will be able to do at this. So it will be important for you to know that as you work on the guideline, that we won't. I don't know that we're going to get all the way to the place where we'll really be talking. You've got a guideline and we've got a firm budget we're ready to hold the line on. I think we're still going to be talking at that level in the winter months here. We're still going to be working.
Okay, thank you.
Mary?
I just quickly want to talk about buses. I know that you've got, I think it's one of your, is it the 5,000 account where you have the lease expense for the buses, right? And I wonder if you could give me an update on the 2 buses that the town meeting approved at our September meeting, and if you foresee carrying electric buses in your budget going forward, or what's your thinking about that?
Well, the second round of the Volkswagen grant has not even come out yet. So we have awarded, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, we did award the grant, the contract to...
Yep, we did. We awarded it to E-Line. We completed the procurement for that over the summer. So we're going to get a second E-Line. But like Jared said, we're waiting for the new round of grants before we can get 2 more electric vehicles.
So that is a discussion for the school committee. We haven't even right now, we haven't even done the transportation budget for next year.
Okay.
I do know that, our replacement cycle will probably call for another 2 buses per district. But it's a significant cost, as you know, for the electric. While we do anticipate another round of the VW, I think we've been dealing with this for 2 years. So, but we can get the least cost to potentially the amount that the electric bus would cost us with the offset from the VW grant.
Okay.
So that might be something that we can even put a placeholder in, which would be potentially the same amount as a new bus, and go with an electric.
Okay.
And just remember that additional warrant article that passed allows us to get 2 buses out of the next VW grant, whereas we've been limited to 1 because it just didn't work out numerically.
That's right.
And it allows us to build the infrastructure, because this will be our 3rd electric bus. And now the infrastructure needs to be upgraded, or we can't add to the fleet. So we're in a good place to keep adding. And I think we were about to have a pretty robust discussion at the school committee level of what we would, actively pursue for additional electric buses beyond the VW grant. And literally COVID hit simultaneously.
Right.
We've just never gotten back to it. So still a priority once we can clear our heads in time a little bit.
Thank you.
Jared and Lori, this is Dee.
Hi, Dee.
I do have a question. I want to go back to what Lori said early on about the drivers, and the ones I jotted down were the subs and the per diem substitutes. Professional development is going to be going up this year, and then the software. And I'm wondering what percent, if any, of those 3 drivers can be written off with CARES Act money?
So very good question. So in this FY21 budget, we carried a line for each school for long-term subs and increased it a little bit, but we did not carry any lines for daily subs. And that's a discussion that we will have. Do we want to put that back? Now, for subs, if a sub is, if we're bringing in a sub that is filling in for somebody due to a COVID reason or a remote reason, then that can absolutely be used for the CARES Act as an offset.
Okay.
So software, anything that is remote related, Zoom, etc., can absolutely be used and charged to the CARES Act. Professional development, we pretty much wiped that away because a lot of our professional development was off-site. So we going to conferences, etc. So that is not necessarily something that can be used as a COVID offset, but that might be something that we put back because hopefully this is behind us come next January. I don't know, optimistic, but so that might be something we want to put back. Supplies and materials, especially at the CPS level, they will cut at each school approximately 30 to 40%, including a lot of maintenance costs. That is something that would have to be put back. Maintenance, getting back to maintenance, a lot of that actually could be offset with the CARES Act, and that's something that we're building right now and have to have some tough conversations about. Because we did budget a little bit of the PPE into the general fund that we were able to move over and use that money for regular maintenance costs. And then was there another one that you had a question on?
No, you've answered all of that, but I have one follow-on. I'm just wondering with special education, I hear so much about the needs for students who have needs. And I'm just wondering if you have tracked any of the costs, if there's a cost differential associated with what their needs would be versus traditional students in the classroom. Not for any nefarious reasons, just I'm just kind of curious.
Well, there's some really objective answers to that. So for example, the only kids who are coming to school full time are certain special education populations. So that doesn't necessarily, and this is where it gets really, we got to go way down into the details, Dee, to figure out whether that's actually costing more, because it's actually the same teachers. The kids are in person versus the other kids who have gone home and are doing it remote.
Okay,
we're going to have to get really detailed to figure out if that actually costs us a lot more. We've learned a lot in general.
You answered my question by saying that they were in the classroom.
Yeah.
Because
certain populations
around the country, that's not the case.
And one of the drivers to open initially and frankly to stay open, it's great for all kids, but it's absolutely essential for most of the special needs population to be in the school building. I think one other example I just give of like the nuance of COVID, the professional development. In the summer, we cut that down because we knew people weren't going to be going out to conferences. What's evolved is all these online options that I think they're going to stick because they're convenient and they're effective. And so we're going to have to relook at that in a new way because new things are now available that actually could be less expensive, but still need to get funded. And we probably eventually want to get to a mix of both. Obviously, where we're going out to conferences and doing online. So there's a lot of nuance to when Jared says rebuild a school system, we did it once, we're going to have to do it again. And my gut tells me we're doing it a third time to get back to whatever normal is at the end of all this. So just iteration after iteration.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
I have some more.
I think you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to follow up on one thing that I had written down that Dee already touched on is that you've identified that you have more long-term subs than had been the case generally. Is there something that's driving that that's related to being remote, or that people are just saying, I'm not going to come into the, do you have some number of teachers who have decided not to teach during the COVID and that's causing you to have a long-term sub?
It's medical conditions that put them at risk for COVID.
Right. So they back away from the table and say, not this year, not during the pandemic. I can't really do this. So you end up with long-term subs. Thank you. That answers that question. Thank you. I have one procedural note. I would love to see when you do a schedule of how things are going to roll out. And you had a very detailed timeline, right to the end of February with a gap there between there and the warrant at March 19th. Somewhere in there, put a target for here's when our public hearing will be. It's not something that's normal in Concord. We've not done it. We've only done it for the last few years. And people just don't attend. They don't know what's going on. So just highlight, this is when we're going to have our public hearing on the budget, and that would be helpful. That's all.
So we got a little reversed in order here. The school committee is seeing the slides you're seeing tonight with you rather than first. I think if we'd been with them first, we probably would have sorted a little of that out before we got here. So we'll do more of that Tuesday, Dean.
Okay. Yeah. That's all fine. And, I'm very pleased that, you were able to do what you were able to do with FY20. In your FY20 recap, you showed how you're able to do things like keep food service whole, even though, you really don't, you're not serving a lot of meals, how you're able to, fund the circuit breaker, et cetera. Do we ever get to a point where there is just money that can't go somewhere and has to be returned to the town? Has that ever happened, or is that?
Sure. More sure. Right now, our revolving accounts are healthy. You really shouldn't have more than 6 months worth of expenses in food service. In fact, there's not many districts that are in as good a place that we are. I inherited that, which is wonderful. We have a great food service program. So there's only so much you can put in the food service. Athletics, while there's not a cap in the athletic revolving account, it needs to be justifiable. We do have quite a bit right now in there, and that is just to fund some future potential projects and also, a little bit of a contingency. The circuit breaker, that is also something that can only, like I said, you can only have, if we receive the $1 million in FY20, we can carry over $1 million, but we cannot carry over a cent more than that next year.
Right.
So there's a cap on that. Excess and deficiency, which I'm going to be talking about, we're hitting that cap right now, which is excellent. And what happens in that case is it offsets assessments for the next year. So we have about $350,000 that we're currently offsetting the general fund with excess and deficiency. That's actually in addition to the 4.99% that I'm projecting right now. So if we technically end with $1 in our account at the high school level and can't put it into any other revolving account, that is something that would go back to the towns to offset future assessments.
So that would effectively just end up flowing back to free cash for the town or whatever. If that were, it seems like an unusual condition, but you have a lot of really good buildup at this point in your various accounts, and so there's some potential that we might see that.
We did end. We ended FY20 in a really good position. This year, it's only January. I'm anticipating staying on track, but I don't know if it's going to be like that. The 4 months of shutdown and all of that savings was more than I anticipated.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. It answers the question. The amount of savings and the number of months that we were really in a minimalist mode, I'm sort of surprised there wasn't something coming back to the town, but you found places to put it, squirrel it away, build up your E&D over on the district side. So there's different cubby holes you can put it in. So that's good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Dean, I've even seen other communities, work together to say, oh, there is this excess, and the schools and towns talk about like, okay, where, maybe you add more to OPEB rather than giving it back, or maybe you set up another kind of revolving or safety net for another topic. Like capital tends to be one where they build, the town meeting will approve a capital account for the schools, and then there's less asks coming to you down the road. So there's lots of different ways to go to it. I don't think we're thinking we're going to get to that here.
We're not looking at huge surpluses. I'm not expecting that last year was an incredible,
Yeah. And I'll always remind you, we had to close school for 4 months to save all that money. So don't count on that again, hopefully.
I'm not, that's fine. Thanks.
Jared, there were two emergency relief line items that were non-DESE for $112,000 each that haven't been spent down. You said you can carry those forward. What are they targeted for?
Right now, whatever we need it for. So it's something that we can carry all the way to the beginning of FY23. It's something that we will certainly talk about during this budget process, what we want to do with that money, but it can be used for salary, it can be used for supplies, it can be used for really anything.
And it doesn't have to be COVID related.
It does not.
Yeah, I think DESE was hearing, especially I think from the Superintendents Association and the School Committee Association, that the CARES money from the federal government, as wonderful as it was, had such tight limits on it. Districts needed another batch that had less restriction, and that's been what's been beneficial to that. It has a lot more fluidity.
Great.
Okay.
Well, if there's no further questions on the Concord budget, I'm happy to jump in on the Regents.
Sounds good.
And can you see that? Great.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So again, the agenda is going to be very similar. Again, we're rebuilding this budget just like we are the CPS budget. So some of the things that I will certainly be going over, again, the region's year-end expenditures, the 100 and the 1,000 functions, how our revolving gift accounts and other account balances ended, some updated external revenue projections, the governor's budget impact, the FTEs, the collective bargaining, OPEB, E&D or excess and deficiency, special education, CARES Act, health insurance, and the financial impact of the enrollment shift for FY22. So again, here's a snapshot of how we closed the region in FY20. Unlike the Concord Public Schools, we have the 8,000 function debt retirement and service, but we don't have the 6,000 function community services in this budget. We have a remaining balance, so we had a remaining balance of $67,993, which went to excess and deficiency. Like the Concord Public Schools, the district was able to take on some food expenses in the general fund. This makes up the bulk of the adjustments in the 3,000 series. Due to some savings in health insurance, unemployment, and other miscellaneous savings in the 5,000 series, we were able to transfer some money out. And then here is the same exact report in the 100 function series. And I will be posting these up online first thing in the morning. So and I think you have them, but if you have any further questions on these, I'm happy to take them. Like the Concord budget, we ended in a very good spot. We spent very little out of the athletic revolving account due to not having a spring season. We were able to max out our circuit breaker revolving account. This should set us up for FY22 and hopefully beyond. Again, I was concerned about the food service revolving account, so I was able to charge food service expenses to the general fund and get this balance to a very healthy level. Our OPEB, or other post-employment benefits, is doing well with almost $5.3 million in it. Unlike the Concord Public Schools side, the region side is responsible for projecting revenue. The following list of items is the revenue we receive before we figure out the total assessments to the two towns. Here's an update on the budget versus actuals. At this time, the only difference since October, when I reported this to the school committee, is in Chapter 71. It went down about $40,000 from the initial projection of the governor. Chapter 70 is what we believed it would be. But again, the Chapter 71 budget, which is the transportation reimbursement, went down slightly from the fall's preliminary budget, but is still $67,440 more than we anticipated. The reason why we reduced this come budget time is we thought that this would be the one area that they would be cutting. We didn't think that they would cut Chapter 70 too much. And we thought that they would cut the Chapter 71, and they didn't cut it as significantly as we thought. We also have assessments, which are in our general fund. The school choice sending formula changed a little bit from the initial governor's budget. So we budgeted $73,019, and it only came in at $13,442, which is $59,577 less than anticipated. A student must have left or aged out. Also, the charter formula, the assessment is $22,409 less than budgeted. So that is some general fund budget savings that we're realizing here. Our FTEs, again, I just need to state that these are budgeted FTEs and there were some fluctuations due to the pandemic. I broke the region's FTEs down into 18 different categories. CPS had 13 different categories. This budget includes approximately 208.16 FTEs. Some administration, clerical, HR, and maintenance staff are split between the two districts. And again, this does not include the 15 or 20 or so transportation drivers. All 5 of the 6 bargaining units at the region are up. Of the 5, 3 are joint. Of the 6, 5 are up. 3 are joint with CPS. And again, we have started, I expect to start the negotiations with the high school custodians in late February. And we've already started with the CCTA. So other post-employment benefits. So according to guidance from Governmental Accounting Standards Board, known as GASB, OPEB, for any of you that do not know, is a, I'm sorry, he's screaming. Go ahead. Always an interruption.
It wouldn't be a meeting without
That's
Jack.
right. Jack has got to make his TV debut tonight. OPEB is part of the compensation that employees earn each year, even though the benefits are not received until after the employment has ended. Therefore, the cost of these future benefits is a part of the cost of providing public services today. Because employers and plan sponsors were not accurately calculating and disclosing the unfunded liability associated with providing OPEB benefits, GASB issued statements 43 and 45 requiring disclosure of OPEB costs and liabilities. Municipalities, school districts, and collaboratives are not required to provide OPEB benefits, but we do. Municipalities that choose to offer OPEB benefits are not required to establish a trust to reduce unfunded liability. Instead, they do what you call pay-go. They pay as you go, which is over time, they're going to pay probably twice as much. If, however, a municipality chooses to establish such a trust, it must follow certain rules. The fund is an expendable trust subject to appropriation that is managed by a trustee or a board of trustees. The assets of the trust are held solely to meet the current and future liabilities of the governmental unit for group health insurance benefits for retirees and their dependents. All monies in the OPEB fund must be accounted for separately from other funds of the governmental unit and are not subject of the claims of any general creditor of the governmental unit. As of June 30th, the region has just under 5.3 million in this fund, which is one of the highest, if not the highest, OPEB balance of any region in the state. We expect the completion of the June 30th, 2020 valuation to come in the next month or so. So the data on the left here is based on the 6/30/2019 report. The district intends to fully fund our OPEB by FY39. And the data on the right is just a snapshot of the required contribution and what our actual contribution was. By law, we are able to reserve 5% of our general fund balance in excess and deficiency. Anything really over 3 to 3.5% is considered a healthy E&D balance. We started the year with $1,376,858,000. We received $569,000 more in revenue than budgeted. That is not typical. That is not typical. But I need to state that. We ended the year with a balance of that $67,994. So that went into E&D. We're using 300,000, not 350. We're using 300,000 to offset the FY21 budget, but this is reserved to reduce, so it's not part of this number right here. Therefore, I am estimating $1,714,604, or 4.99% is our E&D level for FY20. This is really great news for the region going into the unknowns of the next couple of years. Like CPS, we've done a lot of work in special education over the last few years. We are keeping more students in district by creating more in-house programs. And at this time, we only have 28 out-of-district students at the high school, which is also dramatically less than we had just 3 years ago when I started.
It's probably worth noting that the more work we do K-8, it trickles up, right? Because kids will age out. So it's hard if a child's been out of district up through their elementary, middle, it's hard sometimes to make that change at high school. So the more the feeder schools, at least the Concord feeder schools, and certainly we're conversing with Carlisle, keeps kids in, the more the high school will, and we'll just continue to see those numbers come down.
What contributes to such a drop in the tuitions from the general fund from 19 to 20? It's like 700,000?
Sure. So the reason for that is, so what we do is we have our pool of money. So we start off with, we literally zero base every single student. Then we do the circuit breaker, as well as, so the circuit breaker, we anticipate what we're going to get for a reimbursement for that next year. And then we have an IDEA grant that we only charge tuitions to. So we have our total pool, our 3 sources of revenue, and we actually show it in the budget what our total expenditures are for tuitions, and we have offsets. So the general fund is dramatically decreased. We wouldn't necessarily decrease the circuit breaker or the IDEA amount because we sort of know what those are going to be. So it's just a pool of money.
I guess I'm asking the question, is it a decrease in students to be taken care of?
Correct.
So, or a decrease of how we're taking care of them. So rather than going to settings outside of the high school where we're paying anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 or more on occasion, they're staying in our programs, and our programs are often staffed in a way that, we're able to provide them exactly those same types of services and meet their needs, and they're within the high school setting. So it is essentially an ability to not send so many kids to these other private or public day schools.
It seems like a significant.
It is, Kathy, and you're kind of newer to the conversation. It's been a goal, and it's been a lot of hard work and a commitment of a district and the parent community, and a real plan for those numbers to go in the direction they did. So, right. Yep.
So the health insurance, so right now, again, we're figuring out and zero basing what the health insurance is going to be, and we don't know the full impact of COVID-19 on health insurance rates. It's really still unknown. The decrease in elective procedures, though, will likely limit the FY22 rate increases, which will help the FY22 budget. Also, the incentive programs to encourage low-cost health saving accounts has limited the cost growth in recent years. So some districts are looking at 8 to 10% every single year, and we've been able to do things really with, Kerry LaFleur owns a lot of this credit to push people to higher plans that is saving the district lots of money. So the region received a total of $349,526 in grants, the emergency relief as well as the CARES Act. Just like in the Concord section, two things happened recently. They extended the first round of the CARES Act funding till next year, which means we may have some flexibility to offset the FY22 budget if we so choose. In addition, a second round of the DESE Emergency Relief Fund was announced based on our Title I formula. We get a lot less Title I money at the region than we do at CPS, so that's why that number is significantly less than the 112 number that we have at the CPS level. We anticipate to carry both of the relief amounts into FY22, and again, we're hearing up to 3.8 times the 297 for CARES Act relief money that will greatly help us going forward. So if there's one takeaway from both presentations, I want everyone to come away with is this slide. You've seen it before, but it's important to understand the impact enrollment increases and decreases have on assessments. Between October 2018 and October 2019, Concord gained 17 students and Carlisle lost 8. Total enrollment percentages went from 75.25% in Concord and 24.75% in Carlisle to 76.1% in Concord and 23.9% in Carlisle. This 0.85 swing resulted in an assessment increase to Concord of $272,938 in the FY21 budget. This next year, as projected, the October 1 enrollment continued with 38 more Concord students and another 8 less in Carlisle. This will result in another 1.22% assessment swing to Concord and a projected impact of $426,646 to Concord in FY22. And that is it for the region. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, Jared, I always feel like we have to say the assessments and enrollment piece as many different ways as we can because it's confusing. You're really paying for your number of kids at the high school. It sounds like it's these shifts, but the straight, it is, but the other side of the simplest way to look at it is both communities pay for the number of kids they have in the seats on October 1st. So yes, the money follows them, but it is true. You have 38 more kids than what you had last year. So an increase would make sense. So that's the simple version. The numbers are complicated because of how we get to them, but that's the simple version.
Christine?
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you think timing-wise we're going to hear on state aid? Are we going to know anything at all about next year's budget before we have to make a guess here?
Probably not. So it usually comes out the 4th Wednesday in January. I don't anticipate that happening. I don't anticipate, though, based on what happened last year, and this changes every day, and I'm constantly in conversations with the Mass Association of Business Officials, Mass Association of Regional Schools, Laurie and her roundtables, and the MASC. Chapter 70 would be difficult for them to cut, and that's our big number. You usually base, in our situation, in prior years, when we're building a budget in November and we have to guesstimate on what the budget is, what the governor is thinking in January, the safest bet is to adjust. Is to budget what you received that last year. By us having a late town meeting this year and a late close of the warrant, we're able to adjust just like we did this past summer.
Yes.
the amount that we got in Chapter 70 this year is the same amount that we're getting. In previous years, we're very conservative with that because we don't know, and oftentimes results in extra revenue for the district because we budget so conservatively, and that contributed to FY20 having that $569,000 in additional revenue. Chapter 71, transportation, that is something that in the past has been reduced, but they are trying to fund circuit breaker reimbursement, the transportation piece of that. That is something that they haven't made a decision on if they're going to fund that this year. We won't necessarily count on that. So we will continue to be conservative, but the number that I put in for this past year of 550,000 and we got 613, it might be worth the gamble to at least go up to that 613 number. So we're already in a way decreasing assessments by that amount because we're expecting additional revenue. But it's at this time, I do not anticipate knowing probably until hopefully before town meeting, but April, May, and that could change even tomorrow. And Laurie, I don't know if you've heard differently.
I have heard nothing, which makes me quite sure you're right. Yes. Yes.
Okay. The other thing too is with a healthy E&D balance, and I've been in regional districts that did not have a healthy E&D balance. You can't necessarily take any risks because if you budget for, say, Chapter 70 and you take a calculated risk and you don't meet that number, and so you don't have necessarily the budget amount to fund your general fund, you either got to save the money in your general fund or it hits your E&D balance. And if you have under 2% or even less than that, when I was in the district, we had close to zero. So we really had to be really tight on our numbers and be very conservative. Here, it's a conversation that we can have, that we can at least be as conservative. We can at least go up to the max of what we think it could be, maybe, which would again lower the assessments.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mary?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up with Chris's comment earlier when we were talking about CPS about the calendar. So if I understand this year's calendar, we're expecting that the budget that you put in the warrant and that you present to the school committee in response to our final guideline will change between when the warrant closes and town meeting, and you're hoping it will go down, right? And that's because you don't really know how you're going to be delivering education. And the other thing that's happening is you don't have your contracts signed until May. So these are two things that are happening this year. Is that so? Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. If I think, and thank you, the other thing you said is that you'd be including us in those conversations, like, after the warrant closes and we go to town meeting, we'll still be in conversation together. So I'm grateful to that. Thank you. Thank you for that. Looking forward, though, I'm interested in what you think going forward when things stabilize. And the reason I'm asking is because the Finance Committee is going to put an article on the warrant to change the date when we publish the guideline. So I think we need to have a conversation sometime about what would work best for you. I mean, I don't want to make the guideline just this perfunctory number we put out there and then we do the real work. Okay. But then again, we also have to publish a guideline. I think it's relative to the closing of the warrant. So this is just something I'm bringing up. I don't have an answer right now, but let's talk about this maybe when you come back to us.
Yeah, and certainly I have an opinion, Mary, which I want to share. The school committee hasn't even heard it yet, but we've had that behind the door, when we're trying to figure out how to work with the current timing. it always feels a little early. I'll just leave it at that. And let's go from there. We'd love to be part of that conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
I also think the later the guideline, the more concrete our numbers can be.
Absolutely.
So, if it's near when the governor's budget comes out, then we can adjust our revenue numbers, which will greatly impact potentially the region's number in assessments.
Okay. To be continued.
Great.
Thank you.
Christine?
So with the CARES Act funds going up so dramatically, is it realistic to think we're going to be able to spend those? Because it seems like we're going into a different, we're having less to pay, perhaps we're tending, hopefully, towards normalization maybe in the next 18 months. Are we in the next year going to really spend 4 times what we spent in 2020? Just trying to understand what the rationale is for the large increase and whether it'll actually be useful to offset our expenses.
So I have an opinion on that. So one of this past period, they gave us the money on or around, I think it was in, I want to say March. It might have been later than that, but we had until December 30th to spend it, which we were able to identify ways to spend it. And for a municipality, it's not as easy. Now, if they're giving us 4 times the amount, I'm making the assumption that they're going to make this a 18-month or a 24-month timeline to spend that. If we have to spend, if they give that money to us now and we have to spend that by December 30th of next year, that may be difficult. I also, maybe they broaden what we can use that money on. So I think it all depends on the new information that we get in the timeline. Laurie?
Yeah, and we haven't had much conversation with any of our associations. This is all so brand new. The sense I'm getting, because the timelines do sound like they're going to be longer, is this is the money to get you to the other side of COVID for the longer term, even to help offset so that as your revenues are a challenge in the coming years, which is what we're all waiting to really grapple with, you've got some backup funds that can, be used to offset. So I think there's a big picture happening here. I think all these subsidies, they're going to slow down. We know that, right? And I think there's an intent that you do what you need with COVID now, and hopefully it helps to sustain us through the true COVID times, but also allows us some funds to use when they're not all just COVID expenses, but recuperating expenses. The more I think on this and the more I know how we're operating and know we're going to have, slow motion back to normal, everything's going to come with more costs that some of which we can see and some of which we're going to see as we plan for it. So it's also the unknown is covered with this money here. So
in the original round, we weren't allowed to offset for lost revenue. Do you think that would change?
Not with the federal CARES money, no. But I do think the offset it allows for staffing that we're trying to do now might be a way down the road that you come out being whole in these next couple of years, because you'll be able to use it over the next 2 years. Mm. And the definition of COVID staffing, that'll be an interesting piece as we work with the government to see what they're going to let us consider eligible or not. It's been quite a process. I know both Carrie and her team have felt it, and even at the town leadership level, we're all submitting and then waiting for feedback as we still all try to understand what the exact rules are going to be. So more to come. I think we don't expect it will be a problem to spend. It'll be a matter of how we make all this come together so that it's going to the places it needs to go, and we're staying whole where we need to, and we're using our reserves where we need to, and coming to all of you with something reasonable, which we don't know what that is yet, and trying to stay afloat here. I know I've said this to you before. It's very fortunate to be having this conversation in Concord, where there's ongoing support. We've got some reserves. You've got some reserves. We're going to figure this out. The revenue's going to be down, but not catastrophically down. And, my urban colleagues and even the rural colleagues are just looking at something really, really overwhelming. So.
Okay, thank you.
For the moment, Christine, it's helping us just sleep at night, if that matters. To just know it's there. So, yeah.
Dean?
Go. Okay, so I focus on number of students and how much we pay per student. I'm just going to start by referring to how we do it at Minuteman. We're one of 6 or 7 communities at Minuteman, and we have a very small number of students. So the Finance Committee doesn't really bicker about that too hard because it's really it's really an assessment. You have 23 students, pay for them, and we get charged and we pay for them. But at Minuteman, we get charged on a 3-year moving average, I believe, of how many students are at the school. Here, it's 900 students, and we're paying for all of our students. No argument there. But every time 30 new students show up, we get jammed immediately. So I am on my soapbox right now. If you guys could please open up the district agreement and find a way to change that. I know it's a lot of work, but it is painful to see $449,000 that we will pay next year. And that's going to be on top of whatever the budget increase actually is. So that's just, I would really encourage, we have a few of the school committee members on the call, and I'm on my soapbox right now to please get it on the agenda somewhere. And if it's going to take 3 years to do it, then we need to start, and it won't happen for 3 years. So it just needs to be something that we are looking at, because these kinds of numbers are startling. That's a big number. Almost, it's close to $500,000 that we will see it, in a shift in 1 year. And on a very minor note, when I see charts that show numbers of FTEs, if you could just put the population of students in that district, like on the on the CPS chart or on the the CCHS one, just at the bottom, just this district has this many students. My mind, at least that's the way my mind works. Oh, we have this many people in this category. How many students we got in this school? We got this. How many guidance counselors we got? How many kids per guidance counselor? It's a simple number, but if that number's on the bottom of the chart, I can just look at it and see. So.
Yeah, and what
context,
what we do, and just for the new members, because of the situation we're in, we're presenting this to you in a PowerPoint presentation. What we've been doing for the past 2 years is we've been doing actually a fall budget book that really answers all of your guideline questions and then some. And then we also do a spring budget book. In that spring budget book, it does include enrollments. It includes FTEs per, how many guidance counselors, et cetera. And that's certainly something that we will continue to do and get better at it. But yeah, we include the NESDEC report in there, the October 1 enrollment, et cetera. So that is not an issue, but we can get that for you.
Yeah. If you just put on the bottom of that PowerPoint slide, it just, something my mind would just churn on while I'm watching that slide go by. So, thanks.
Christine?
Anything on capital needs in the high school?
So we are in preliminary talks, the facilities director, myself, and we're going to bring something eventually to Laurie. Right now, we don't anticipate anything for next year, and I'll let Laurie answer this as well. But as the school gets older, we are identifying things that we will fund right now through the general fund, but there might be little things eventually that are just too much for the for the general fund. But it is a plan of ours to have a little 5-year capital. It's always good to have that just to identify it even if we're funding it through the general fund, it's always good to have that.
Yeah, just as you're getting into, you're between years 5 and 10, so we're starting to try to get proactive on the, age and life of some of these pieces of equipment, whether it be technology or the infrastructure of the building. So I don't think we're going to bring you a big ask.
Okay.
And I'm not even going to mention parking. So we fixed parking because now only half the kids come to school. But, eventually, we're going to have to figure out how to pave the road at least. But anyway, I don't see that as I don't know. I won't speak. The school committee hasn't talked about it yet. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
Okay, thanks.
the road is the big dangling one, Christine, in my mind, the big ticket one. And, at some point it's got to get done, so.
Okay, no other questions from the committee?
Great.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jared and Dr. Hunter. That was wonderful. And we really appreciate you taking the time and effort to put it together for us. Again, I know you have a lot going on, so we really do appreciate that. And we look forward to our next session in early February. And it sounds like a few other meetings that we can look forward to as well. So we'll just keep talking to each other and see how it's going. So I guess we'll have to, at least according to our calendar, we'll still be looking to issue a preliminary guidance sometime toward the end of January. So when we'll be basing that, given the information that we have, we're really coming at it more from a affordability perspective at that point, because we won't yet have budget requests from you or the town, or so they'll be looking at what do we think the town can do, which is pretty, which looks tight, I think, to us this year. But we you need to do your thing. We'll be looking at it. It's going to be an interesting discussion. I think, as you say, we're in a good place compared to other communities, so we'll figure it out.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Have a
Thank you
great
so
night,
much.
everybody.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So is there any other discussion that the committee would like to have? So some of you, that was your first session, and this is similar to what we will do next week with the town and with Minuteman. In the second round, which occurs in February, that's when the groups will actually come forward with the numbers that they're looking for. So that's sort of a different discussion. This first round is a bit it's sort of setting the groundwork. So I think that's a pretty good discussion. I think it's challenging because we don't, they don't know what they don't know, and we don't know, what we don't know. And as I said, I think to get to the preliminary guideline number, we'll be relying more on the discussion, information from Kerry on what we have when we sort of do the math and the model, and what we think is going to be affordable and reasonable as a percentage of tax growth for the town. And then we'll need to bounce that back up against what the budget units come back with for needs. So,
Christine?
Yes, Wade.
To Dean's point, which, we saw a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
It's a little overwhelming.
Yes.
And I guess the question is, what are the metrics that we really need to be focusing on here? That's because it's too much. I mean, for my mind, maybe not for others' minds, but it's a lot of, and to Dean's point, it's like, what does it come down to? It really comes down to, this is our student population, this is our cost per student over time, and then we can back out and get into more detail. But, it's that.
Yeah, it's really the labor cost. And so you'll see, I think the presentation was just sent to us in about an hour or so before this meeting. So that's the quickest they could prepare it. You will have it available to you so you can look at it in more detail, but it's really the labor costs. And so that's what the key driver is for them, right? So that's why we were talking about the union contract. So that COLA increase, what benefits are going to be, that becomes the main driver, because it's really, it's all about the head count, which hasn't changed very much, I don't think. So you have head count, and it's going to be what that head count gets paid, what the benefits are associated with that. That's what's the main driver. Capital is not a big driver. We just talked about that. The debt service is pretty well known. So it's how many people and what they're paid, and that tends to be the big driver. So what the COLA increase is, some of that is known, but it sounds like a lot of the contracts are really up now. So we have a big component that we don't know, but we can make an estimate of what we think the cost of living adjustments will be. But it's not just that, because you have these things called lanes that have to do with seniority, and the more years you have as an educator, there are you move into a different lane, which also, but when they come back for their request, Jared will take us through that, and he'll talk through sort of where they think they are from an education perspective. That's my thought. And if Dean or Mary or others have thoughts on what people should focus on in terms of thinking about the budget.
No, I think you said it really exactly right, Chris. It's headcount and the contracts.
So Chris, I think it's certainly starting at the big picture level, per capita spending, for example, per student spending, and then sort of break out capital, certainly a big piece. But I guess, it would be helpful if they've got top 3 to 5 initiatives, substantive initiatives that they're intending to focus on for the next fiscal year, whether it's administrative issues, whether it's teaching issues, meaning educational issues, revamping curriculum, all that stuff, and then how that affects the spending, I think would be helpful to have a high-level summary like that, because I'm with Wade. A lot of this stuff, do I really care about $50,000 in this account number? Not really.
Yeah. Well, what Jared did last year, which I think was helpful, is he came back and he showed you sort of, now it's going to be a challenge, because one of the other issues we have is a lack of comparability, right? So last year, and we did this twice, they were able to sort of roll forward from the prior year spend to what they were asking for. And in that, they gave you all the big pieces. So they would say, this is what labor costs. This is what additional headcount costs. This is what maintenance would cost. So he'll do that. And he'll do that in the big dollar buckets. So you'll get a sense of what's changing in the budget. The challenge for us a little bit is, I think we're not going to always be looking at apples to apples. And that makes it hard, I guess.
And for me, I think the apples to apples comparison, while it's helpful, it doesn't necessarily, I'm not sure it would drive all of my questions. I guess I also kind of look at, well, what are the choices that you had? And why did you pick some of these choices versus others? And that's really not to second guess their choices necessarily, but to at least have a conversation and understanding as to what their thought patterns were and what their thinking was.
What the trade-offs were.
Right, and helps us get a little bit more comfortable with the decisions they made, right?
Yep.
And provides more context for how that rolls into the spending.
Okay, that's good. Kathy?
Yeah, just listening to the conversation, it does seem that, we did ask to get the budget information, and there is a preponderance of information there. But if it really is, and I see where you're coming from, the biggest number is salary. So that's, the cost of employment. And if we could just focus on the total and the cost per student, it might be an easier way to come up with a reasonableness. Like, did the cost per student go up 1%, or did it, go up 10%?
And, we can certainly extract from there, holding aside, so this is where it gets hard, right? So you have the COVID impact, right? So let's say it did go up 10%. I'm making it up. How some of that's where it gets into the apples to apples. So I'm happy to talk to Jared about that. And I think he does a very good job because he has to answer these exact same questions to the school committee and to Lori. So by the time he gets to us, he's actually been through it a few times. So I will definitely, provide some feedback in terms of, what's the best way for us to get the FinCom through it. And if per capita is useful, then we'll ask for that. We can ask for that information. But I guess I just want to be a little flexible because I found in the past, I've only been, this is my third year, but he's done a good job of rolling forward the big dollars. But I agree with the comments. If you can easily get lost in the detail in those charts because there is a lot of detail, and unfortunately the way DESE changes the categorization every year, you could spend the whole meeting just having a reconciliation from one year to the last, and that's not helpful. It doesn't get us there.
Right. The way they're able to move money.
Yes, right. You really have to look at it at a macro basis to get your arm around it. Yeah, Ray.
Yeah, I have a question. As the newbie, it was like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, a lot of information, and it would have helped me to at least know what was important to see this a day ahead of time or something, or a couple hours ahead, because I couldn't tell how much of it was something everybody else knew and I didn't. Like what was chapter 70? I don't know. I didn't read chapter 69. I don't know. And
right.
All those things that you could sort out. What are my real questions and what is just, like you say, the weeds.
Yep.
So I guess the question is really, like Dean was suggesting, some background in terms of number of students, and even if it's information from the year before, 2017, 2018, whatever, a little history, even if it's not on the PowerPoint, would enable me to see, a trend. Okay, here's COVID starts, and that's, some of that change is attributable to COVID, and some of it is, policy change, program change.
Mm-hmm. Or delivery changes, right? Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else have thoughts? Okay, good. So we've started. I think it'll be interesting. Mary, it's one thing that I thought was interesting, and this is perhaps a speculation on my part, but if based on how the warrant works, if I'm correct, you cannot go up, you can only go down.
Right.
And Lori mentioned that.
Right.
Then my assumption is that what we will get in the second round will be conservative.
Yep. Yeah.
So and as I signaled, I think at the end there, again, we're not done because we haven't seen revenue updates and so forth. But I've done the math a few times. We don't have a lot of wiggle room, so it'll be interesting, right? We don't have a lot of free cash to use. Inflation, our SGR rate is low. So anyway, it'll be an interesting discussion. Yeah. The good news is they do have a lot of reserves from 2020, which I hope will help them come back with.
No, I think you said it right. We're going to give them what we think we can afford.
Yep.
And
then we'll see how we come together with that.
Right. But it's not. I don't think it's going to be at the initial guideline. It's going to be as we get closer to town meeting.
Yeah, I think so too. So this will be a different process than what we're. Again, it was different last year too. So everybody.
What I'm a little bit concerned that this becomes the norm, that we publish a guideline at a certain day and then the real budget work happens after that. And I want to make sure we avoid that.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm talking about when should we be publishing the guideline. But I'm ahead of myself right now. But I think you said it right. We're gonna publish what we think we can afford.
Yep.
And there may be a big pool of unrestricted emergency relief money and we don't know.
We don't know,
Right.
right. And that can really help. And we do have some, as they do have some good reserves at the school. The town, less so. They don't have the same ability to carry over funds. So, of course, they do have capital projects, and that's kind of what ends up happening, right? You have an operating budget and a capital budget, and the town tends to slow down capital projects to make up for issues in the budget, as they did last year. And I anticipate the same thing will happen this year. The schools don't have much capital. It's all really operating, right? It's all salary and payroll and benefits. So
I have a question though about the capital for the CPS. I think I heard Jared say that they have like $900,000 a year.
Yep.
Yes, through the town.
I'm wondering, maybe Carrie can answer this for me. Carrie, is that something that has been kind of every year for the last 5 years, or what is that about?
Well,
an allocation for CPS.
It is. It's an allocation that the town manager makes in the capital budget, and on an annual basis, it has been $800,000 to $900,000, and that's based on, they provide us with their 5-year plan, and I think for most years that amount has been fairly adequate.
So because they talk about the driveway, and there was an article a couple years ago that was about about the driveway, but then they didn't move it. And so I'm wondering, could they say we want $400,000 this year, and then that'll go towards the driveway when we get up to $900,000, or do they have to use it during that year?
So the driveway would be a district capital project, and that would be outside of the 5-year plan. So
right, that's true.
So as the district,
well, what if they had a driveway like that at the middle school?
Well, sure, they certainly are free to submit the totality of their requests, and then the town manager is the one who makes the draft allocation.
Okay.
But they couldn't carry the funds forward, right, Carrie?
They absolutely could, because we moved the cash portion, or we moved the capital is all in a standalone article.
Okay.
So
so it doesn't roll into general fund. Okay.
Right. So the life of that article is as long as an appropriation.
Okay, you're right.
Can I just quickly ask? So, Carrie, the last time we spoke to you about the guideline, the last time we went over the revenue receipts and the local receipts, I came away with we needed to cut $1.9 million if we had a 2.5% tax increase, right? You remember that?
Yeah, I don't commit.
That was worst case.
I don't have that spreadsheet open, but
okay. I'm just wondering, has anything fallen one way or the other, positively or negatively, based on your first initial projections about state aid, local receipts? Anything that's noteworthy?
No, it's
new
still
growth.
It's still very early.
Okay. Fair enough.
The governor's budget comes out at the end of the month. Any of our fixed costs that we've made estimates for, it's still too early in the process to sharpen those.
Okay.
And again, with our local receipts,
yes,
we don't know what the local economy is going to look like essentially, more than a year from now. It's really hard to tell. It really depends as we get into the vaccine rollout, and if it starts ticking with the timetables and things start returning to normal. And I'm hoping we're going to see some of that as we get closer to town meeting, so we can maybe sharpen some of those revenue estimates. But right now, our local receipt estimates are very low.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else we should talk about it? So I will, I'm going to put my thinking cap on and see if I can come up with some suggestions for data that we might want to get from Jared when we meet the next time. Anything else you guys want to talk about in guidelines, or are we all set? Okay, I think we're good. So I guess I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all right. So I have to do a roll call vote on that. So I'll use my TV screen here. Kathy Kukalo.
Aye.
Chris Reynolds, aye. Dick Jamieson.
Yes.
Dee Ortner.
Yes.
Mary Hartman.
Yes.
Ray Andrews. Ray Andrews, I need you unmuted. Thank you. I see yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Dean Banfield.
Yes.
Greg Gariello.
Yes.
Wade Rubenstein.
Yes.
Bill Swain.
Yes.
John Hickling.
Yes.
Lois Wassoff.
Yes.
Parashar Patel.
Yes.
Andrea Zoll.
Yes.
I think I got everybody. Is that right? Good. Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you.
everyone.
Nicely
Thank
done,
you, Chris.
Christine.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.
Bye-bye.